Hello and welcome. My name's Jessica Rose. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make an illusion necklace. These are lovely necklaces, really simple and easy to make, but they are very, very effective. And you can see an example here that I've got with some beautiful briolette beads. So it's two-stranded. So I've got one strand here, one strand there. We're going to put a little safety chain at the back, which I'll show you how to do. It's very straightforward so that it can be adjustable sizes for people's different lengths they like to have it. And we're going to also pop in a lobster clasp there. And yeah, obviously once you learn how to do this technique, you can do it with any design. So I've kept this design very simple with just all the same beads, but you can do it with anything. And I'm going to use illusion wire, which is this clear kind of, it's almost like fishing wire. But you could also do this with something called tiger tail, which has like a silvery effect to it, and you can get them in different colours as well if you wanted the wire that you're using to have a colour to it too. So lots of different options once you learn the technique. So what we're going to use for this project, we've obviously got our illusion wire, or nylon wire it's often called. I've got a little bit of chain. I'm going to be working in gold because it's a bit easier for you guys to see on the video, but obviously you could do it in silver. I actually made this chain by just attaching jump rings together, but you can also buy a little bit of gold plated or silver plated chain. I've got a gold plated lobster clasp here and a jump ring, and then we're going to be using crimps, or sometimes they're called crimp tubes, and this is the size that I'm using. I'm using the beadlon ones, but you can get any 0.8 millimeters. I could also use 1 millimeter. Essentially we just want some small ones. You can work with larger ones, but it doesn't look quite as neat with the technique that we're using. So that's what we're going to be using. And then finally the beads or crystals. I've got some really nice briolettes, but you can also do this with round beads. It's entirely up to you. And then I've got my pliers, so I'm going to use some chain nose pliers, which are flat in the middle and pointed. They're going to be useful for crimping, and I'm going to use my flat nose pliers at the end to help with my jump ring. And then I can use my side cutters, but you could also use scissors because I'm just using it to cut the nylon wire. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is take my nylon wire and cut two nice generous lengths of it for my necklace. So I want to make sure, and it can help to hold it around your neck, I want to make sure that it is plenty long enough to go all the way around my neck and a little bit extra. And I'm just going to cut one and two. At this stage I'm not trying to get a precise length, but I want to make sure I have extra so that I can play around with the design a bit. So I've got my two lengths. The next thing I'll do is I'll place my beads on my beading mat and have a look at the design that I want. So I've got two types of beads here. I've got these lovely amethyst beads, which I'm going to go for the top layer, and they're sort of dark ones. And then I've got some light amethyst as well, which I think I'm going to put round for the bottom layer. So I'm just sort of placing it how I think it might hang to give myself an idea. And I'll spend a bit of time at this stage working out my design, thinking about how I might like it before I commit. Yeah, so I think that's going to look nice with the two layers. Then I'm going to take my length of nylon wire, and again I use my neck a lot, so I kind of put it around my neck and work out where the back is and where the front is. So I don't want to work at the back of the illusion wire because I don't want beads sort of on the back of my neck. You could do that in a design, but for this design I'm mainly focusing on the front. So that gives me an idea of where to place my beads. And we're not being precise at this stage, we've got plenty of extra, so we're just working roughly. So then I'm going to place on a crimp. So this is a crimp. They are tiny little tubes. and that's pretty much all they are. There's a big hole in the middle, and so I'm just going to thread that through. Make sure I'm leaving plenty of room for the back of the piece, and then I want to secure this in place, my first crimp. So I'm just going to use my chain nose pliers, place it over the crimp and push down once firmly, and then let it go. You don't want to do lots of goes at the crimp because you can break it and it will fall off, which we don't want. So now that I'm happy with that, I'm going to thread on my first bead. There we go, all the way through. And pull it down till it meets the crimp. Great, then I want to secure it on the other side, so I'm going to pop another crimp on from this end this time. All the way down. When I'm happy that it's in place, I'm going to do exactly the same. Use my chain nose pliers, get it nice and neat, and push down. And that is my first bead in place. And essentially that's what we're going to be doing for the whole piece. So the next stage is thinking about the gaps between them. So I'm quite happy with this sort of design and level of gap. So I'm going to go roughly about here with my next crimp. I'm going to thread that one on now. And the biggest challenge, I suppose, if you like, with illusion necklaces is just about placement and where you want things to go. So I'm pretty happy with that distance between the two. You can actually put down and measure the distance between. So if I picked, well, if I start at the beginning, I'd maybe go along to number 4 between here and there. I don't tend to work this way, if I'm honest. I'm a bit more relaxed about the distance, and I use my eyes because I actually think I want it slightly smaller than that. But yeah, if you'd like to be more precise, that is one option. So I'm going to commit to that there. And then I'm just going to keep going. So I'm going to go along this section of thread and just fill up with these light beads, and then I will move on to working with my second piece of string for the dark crystals. So now I've finished my first strand. I've actually changed my design a little bit because, and this is quite an interesting thing to think about, a lot of these beads, the hole wasn't big enough to fit on my strand, and when you're working with semi-precious stones like these amethysts, that happens quite a lot. So one way you can get around that is by working with a smaller strand, like using a finer one. Or sometimes we have to adjust and change our design. So what I've done is just use the ones that do fit and made that into one strand. And I'm going to use some crystals that I have here that kind of complementary colours to go on the second strand. So I think I'm still going to have a really lovely design. So I've got my first strand. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 crystals on there. And I'm going to put that aside for a moment and start working on my second strand. So I've thought a little bit about the design I want for this one. And of course, if you make any mistakes when you're making these pieces, you can always just cut it off and start again. You can always use the beads. So I'm just taking another length of nylon because I cut up my original one. There we go. And I'm going to start from the middle. So I first want to decide, is this my inside or is this my outside? And I think this is going to be my outside. So on my inside, I want in terms of the pattern, I want some beads in between each one. So I'm going to keep roughly the same distance, but I want them in between. So I want 1, 2, 3, 4 at least, and then I might have 5 and 6. So it's either going to be 4 or 6. So I'm going to start from the middle and work my way out. So I'm going to start from, if this is my central bead here, I'm going to start by creating the little cluster that I want next to the central bead. So you'll see what I mean as I go through. So I'm going to start roughly in the middle of this nylon wire. I'm just going to thread on a crimp. And use my pliers to hold it in place. So you can either do a single bead, but like I said, I'm going to go for a cluster. So I've got some bicone crystals here. I've got these kind of coppery colours, which is a 3mm. Then I've got this amethyst colour, which is a 4mm. And then I'm going to end with another copper. And pop them all the way down. And of course they are trapped by my crimp bead, and then I'm going to pop another crimp bead on the other end. So this is exactly the same technique that we're using throughout. Like I said, the main area that we're focusing on is the spacing and getting the spacing how we want it. And there we go. So now I've done my first one, and go back to my original strand, and I'm just going to hold it in place with a couple of pliers so that it doesn't keep bouncing back. Ones that I'm not using. And I try and hold it in a way how I think that it will hang, so that I'm getting kind of an accurate feel for the spacing on my piece. Okay, that will do. Then if I place my next layer on, that's going to fit in between those two quite nicely. So when I think about where I want my next one to be, it's not the exact same gap because this piece is higher up the neck, so it's not going to have quite as much distance to go. So it's a slightly smaller gap that I'm going to be working with. So I want to create it about here. And if I check that on my measurement, that is somewhere between 2.5 and 3. If I go there, it's about 3 centimeters along. The other one was about 3.5, and also it wasn't 3 beads, it was just 2. So again, you can either do this very intuitively and just put them where you think they should go, or you can use the measurements. It kind of depends usually on your personality and how you like to do things. So I'll place on my crimp, check where I want it to go, around about 3 centimeters. And secure it there, and I'm going to thread on my next 3 beads. And so I'm just going to keep going in that way with about a 3 centimeter gap between each one until I've done either my 4 or my 6. I think I'm going to go for 6 just to make it a slightly fuller necklace, and then I'll show you how to size them up and attach them next. So now I've finished, and I did go for 6 on the design, and I actually really like this design. It's been a bit of a happy accident. But yeah, so you can see that they go all the way down and there's roughly equal gaps in between. So what we need to do now is decide on the length of the piece and how the two are going to sit together. So how I do that is I'm going to grab both of them And it can be a little bit fiddly. This is where you want to have an extra couple of hands, but you can do it with two, I promise. And I'm just going to place them roughly where I want them to go. And you can fiddle around with this. I'll often go in front of the mirror and hold it up as well, just to see how it's going to hang and just sort of adjust it. And so I think I'm going to go for something a little bit like that. So it's a little bit twisted, but assume that the wire isn't twisted, and that's the kind of design. If I hold it flat, it might be easier to see that I'm sort of looking for. It's quite tricky on the mat, but you'll see it when you do it yourself. It will be a lot easier to kind of get the overall gist of what you're going for. So then I'm going to use some slightly thicker crimps to do my end. So I'm going to start with one side, and I feel like here is approximately where I'm going to want to attach my clasp. So these crimps need to fit both of my nylon wires through twice, or at least a minimum of 3 of them. So the size that I've gone up to, these are 1.3 millimeters, or in the beadalon it's number 2. And again, if you can't find the exact measurement, go for something similar. 1.2 is probably fine, 1.4, 1.5. So I've got 2 different lengths here, and it's easier sometimes to work with the same length. So I'm just going to cut down that one. So I've got 2 roughly the same length. So it's not far off the end that I'm actually going to attach it. And I'm going to attach my clasp on this side. So I'm just going to thread this through. All the way down, and then I'm going to thread on my clasp. So you could use a lobster clasp or a bolt ring clasp, whatever you like. So I've got my crimp, I've got my lobster clasp, and I'm going to wrap my 2 bits back through that crimp again, just to encapsulate that lobster clasp in there. And then I'm just going to pull it through. I want to still keep the same sort of length that I had at the beginning, so I might need to adjust it a little bit. And I'm pulling it there, so I'm sort of trapping it. So before I commit to crimping that, I just want to make sure it's got enough room for my clasp to move around. Sometimes you can put a jump ring on as well if you want to. It doesn't really matter, it just depends on your design, but I'm happy with this. So when I am ready to go for it, I'm going to take my chain nose pliers over the larger crimp, and I do exactly the same. I just do one firm push. If you do miss the firm push, you can do one more, but what you want to avoid doing is lots of pushes, because that is likely to break it. And if you're not happy with the look of the crimps, I mean, I think they look quite neat, but for some pieces, especially high-end pieces, I want a different look. You can buy things called crimp covers, which are like little C shapes that you put around it, and it makes it look more like a bead. So that's always an option in terms of your design. Now I'm going to go in and just cut off the excess wire. Make sure you cut off only the excess, not the ones that we're using. And then I'll do it one by one, get in nice and neat there. So that's one side done. Then I'm going to do something very similar on the other side. So again, I'm just checking how my piece is going to hang and the length that I want to go for on this side. So do take your time with that. It's a little bit fiddly. So that you get something that works. I'm just comparing it to the other side so I get a nice length. Okay, so this side I want to do it a little bit about here. Gonna do exactly the same, cut down the length of my nylon so that they're both approximately the same length. They're not far off. thread on my thicker crimps. And I find with crimps, instead of buying them all individually, I quite like to buy a pack of crimps so that I've got all the different sizes, because there's nothing more frustrating than making a whole project and then you just need one crimp or a couple of crimps and you don't have the right size. So that's a little tip, just to have them all in stock, a few different sizes. So what I've just threaded on there, instead of, you could put a jump ring on. If you put just a jump ring on, and a jump ring is a finding, which is like just one of these, an individual loop, then you can attach it to that. But I'm going to use a whole chain because it means it makes my necklace an adjustable length. So that can really help, especially with illusion necklaces, because sometimes we want to hang them a little bit higher on the neck or a little bit lower on the neck. So I now pretty much always use chain instead of a jump ring, just to give my customers or myself that option. So exactly the same, I've threaded it back through, encapsulating it in there. And I'm going to just commit to that crimp placing. Cut off those excess wires and we'll be able to have a look at our lovely illusion necklace. Okay, and so to attach it, open the lobster clasp, pop it wherever you want. And the wires are a little bit squiggly because they've been wrapped up, but if I leave them out, they will stretch out and sit how the other ones do. It just takes a little bit of time. And there you have your finished illusion necklace. And these are just wonderful projects to make. They're great to make as part of a jewellery business if you want to make and sell things. They're wonderful gifts. You can play around with the design. Once you've mastered the basic technique, you could put a larger pendant perhaps in the middle. They really are just lovely to wear as well. Very easy wearable pieces, and they don't require that many beads, which is brilliant. So best of luck with making your illusion necklace projects. Do come and share them with me. I'd love to come and see them over on the Jewellers Academy Facebook group, or tag us in your projects at Jewellers Academy on Instagram. For more videos on jewellery making, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please do like the video if you enjoyed this project. And for more information on in-depth courses and development for jewellers, do come and have a look on the website at jewellersacademy.com. Thanks for joining me for this project, and I look forward to seeing you on another video very soon. Bye for now.